All right, this is where we left off. And remember, I said the economy, the key thing here is, I want you to underline this, economy is self-correcting. It fixed itself. Now, don't say it that way. Don't say it that way. I used to have a lot of problems with that with kids, and I'd give them an AP macro essay, and I'd say, what happens? And they'd say the economy fixes itself. You need to say what's going to happen, and we're going to go over that in a minute. Now, let's talk about the opposite. Okay. Now, remember, all this should be in your notes now. Write this in your notes. Long run equilibrium adjustment to a positive AD shock. Okay. So you got this guy named Jerry. He's working as a teacher, likes his job, needs it, the whole deal. So here's what happens. You got all this drawn down here. Okay. Something happens out there, and the economy super heats up. Okay. Maybe, people just, things have been bad for a while. I know that this is what the government's hoping, that as soon as we get out, I mean, there's all this, this is Wednesday, all these theories are going on about Georgia's opening up, Florida's getting close to opening up, or at least doing partial reopens. Everyone's hoping demand, all this pent up demand, all these people been staying home are immediately going to go out and spend a bunch of money. A lot of people tell you no, they're going to be scared, but that's what the hope is. So all of a sudden, let's say our economy was at long and short run equilibrium, and then all of a sudden people just feel like the economy is going to take off. There is some really positive demand shock. Doesn't matter what it is, but the economy demand goes up. So here we go. So you're going to draw this in your notes. You got a title here. All right, so we go from AD to 81, and what happens is demand goes up dramatically. Now we're in, of course, I hope you remember this, an inflationary gap. And the thing about inflationary gap is wages are really high. The economy is basically overheated. I make the joke about your grandmother going to get a job at Hooters. I'm sure I made that joke this year. That's how hot the economy is. So here's the thing. Maybe teaching is not a good example, but a few years ago, I got a couple offers from, I had some people try to get me to go to some other schools. One of them is one of the real rich prep schools here in Orlando. A friend of mine worked there, and he said he could get me a job. We never did talk about salary. And so maybe teaching is not a good example. I would have rather used a student, but I don't have one. So let's say the economy is so hot that teachers are leaving. They're going to other states that pay more. They're leaving, like especially your math teachers, they're leaving to go into industry. Your science teachers going to work at Martin Marietta. So the economy is so hot. What should, if you were in a normal business, what should happen? Well, they should start giving raises. Now, let's say, and again, a teacher is probably a ridiculous example, especially someone with a degree like mine in history. But the deal is the economy is very hot. And so what happens is Orange County, to keep its teachers from leaving, ought to come give us all a big raise. So we don't leave and go to Seminole County, which pays better than Orange, or to Georgia, which pays way better than Florida. They ought to come do something, but they're not. Why? Here we go again, because wages are sticky. Wages are sticky. Now remember, I'm giving you the oral narrative here. And so wages are sticky, but eventually, at the end of the year, we normally get a new contract every year. That's the way it's supposed to work. At the end of the year, they ought to come give us a big raise. Again, I probably should have used engineering as an example. And so let's just, get this right. So they should give me a big raise. Eventually, they're going to do that. But let's skip the teacher example and jump over. Let's say that this person we're talking about is an engineer. Okay. So what's happening is this person's getting offers from everywhere. There's 10 different engineering firms that have called him this week. So he goes back to his boss and he's like, I've been here 20 years. I really like working for you guys, but hey, I'm getting all these offers. I'm going to give you a chance now. Instead of giving me a 2% raise like you normally do, or give me a 20% raise, or I'm out of here. What are they probably going to do? Well, if the economy's that hot, they're probably going to give him the raise. So imagine this is going on all across the economy. Pizza delivery drivers making $20 an hour. People running the drive-through at McDonald's making $18 an hour. That is an increase in wages. Now, here we go. They're sticky. But if there is a general increase in wages across the economy, what is going to happen? Which line is going to move? And I know you want to say demand, people have more money. That would happen. But right now, what we're talking about is supply because we're using that word wages. So what's going to happen if there's an increase in wages, just like we talked about, if they raise the minimum wage to 30 bucks an hour, what's going to happen? Which line is going to move? Aggregate supply. So what's going to happen is short run aggregate supply is now, if wages go up, is that an increase in supply or a decrease? It is a decrease. Now, what's eventually going to happen now, remember, this is in the long run, not the short run. If you look at the title here, long run equilibrium, this thing, I don't know why we're going backwards here. This thing is going to shift to the left. Okay. Now, we don't know how long this is going to take. That's the problem with the classical approach. Make sure you understand that. This is the long run. And you remember why Keynes made fun of the long run. That's one of his most famous quotes. In the long run, we're all dead. Okay, I know that's very morbid and we don't want to hear about it. But that is a famous quote, people. And as I've told you, even as you're taking notes right now, you got AP exam coming up 3 weeks from tomorrow. You should be, it's Wednesday as I'm doing this. You should really be focused on studying, but you probably just want to get this lecture done and play another video game. Anyway, my wife and I are watching this Netflix show, Last Kingdom. It's number 3 right now on Netflix. That's how popular it is. And we are watching 2 episodes a night, and I would love to go take a break right now and watch one, but I'm not. I'm going to try and think of the long run, trying to think, making you prepared for this exam. But most of us are focused on the short run. It is human nature. But in the long run, this is going to shift to the left. As it shifts to the left, an increase in supply, eventually it's going to get back to equilibrium. So we've gone from here to here, and now we're going back to equilibrium. So now the problem is solved. The economy is good again. What's the only thing that has changed in the long run? Is price. GDP is back to where it was. Only thing has gone up is price. And this is why, if you remember from a couple of weeks ago, we talked about money being neutral. If monetary policy, if they would use monetary policy to try to fix this problem, what they would do is they dump a bunch of money out there, or in this case, they take a bunch of money out. And the deal is it would, in the long run, just drive up price, but GDP and unemployment would go back to the natural rate of unemployment, and GDP would go back to potential GDP or potential output. Anyway, guys, I really hope you are understanding this. This is a complicated topic. All right, now, I'm going to go on to the next slide here. I'll go ahead and put our A, B, and C. We went from here to here to here. Okay, now, this time I don't want you to write it. You wrote it last time, but let's talk about this. The growth in stock market, wealth goes up, people feel rich, they start spending more money, AD increases and shifts aggregate demand to the right. Again, you don't need to write this, but please at least listen to it to make sure you understand that. The short run, real GDP goes up and prices go up, inflation goes up. All right, this is called an inflationary gap. Labor market increases. Here we go, sticky wages. They slowly move up, causing nominal wages to rise, and that is going to cause SRAS to shift to the left. Okay, and once real GDP is there, the economy is back in long and short run equilibrium. Okay, price level has gone up. As I said, that's the only thing that's really changed. There's a whole bunch of things that have happened to people, but if you look at just the economy, it's gone back to potential output. The economy will always work to go back there. That's why it's called self-correcting. And there we go. Economy is self-correcting. Okay, now, got about 6 minutes left that I can use on this video. Now, just pay attention here. I went back through the last 9 years of AP exams and looked for how this is. I've given you the complicated version. Hopefully you understand what sticky wages are. Wages don't move quickly. They move slowly. All right, so let's see how it looks in APSA. So write this down. How does it look? In 2011, they always put out 2 AP macro exams a year. This year, our theory is they're going to have 10, 15, maybe 20 different AP macro exams. So you can't call your buddy up and ask what the answers are. That's my theory, that they're going to have a whole bunch of different, essays that kids are getting. All right, so now you don't need to write this, but let's just look at this. This was an essay question. I'm just telling you. This was, remember, essay question 1 has all these different parts. The economy is in a recession. Now look at this. In the absence of any changes in fiscal and monetary policies in the long run, Will the short run aggregate supply curve shift to the left, shift to the right, or remain unchanged? Now, I have looked, and in the past 9 years, I have found, I'm going to show you all of them, 4 times this has been in the essays. This is why I'm investing 2 videos on a Wednesday to show you how to do this. This is probably going to be in your essay question somewhere. So here's the deal. If there is a recession, this is what's happened. Now, here's the short version of this. I just want you to know this line is going to shift back over here. And it's not SAS, it's SRAS. This is going to shift back to the right. So there's your answer. What will happen to the short run aggregate supply curve? In this case, it will shift to the right. Now, you got to explain it. So here, I don't know how well I'm going to do this, but here's how I would do this. When you see a question like this, it's usually worth 2 points. You get 1 point just for saying which way it's going to go, and they basically made it a multiple choice question. And then you get a point for explaining it. So I would say, as the economy goes along in a recession, eventually wages go down. It takes them a while because they are sticky, but then SRAS will shift to the right as there's a decrease in wages, ending the recession. Now, there may be a shorter way to do it, but that's what I would do it, and this is 2 points. So there's two exams in 2011. This is what they put on one of them. Let's look at what they put on the other one, 2011 Form A. Look at this. Now assume, once again, this was a recession. Now assume instead the government, the Federal Reserve, take no policy action to the recession. In the long run, well, here's the same question. I'm trying to explain to you how important this is. Will the short run aggregate supply increase, decrease, or remain unchanged? We're here. Now remember, you're not going to have this graph in front of you probably. They're going to give you some scenarios and ask you what happens. But if we're in a recession, here's the short version. SRAS will shift to the right. If we're in an inflationary gap, it's going to shift to the left. Okay, it's not going to be AD that moves in the long run. It's going to be SRAS. If we're in a recession, it goes to the right. If we're in an inflationary gap, it's going to go to the left. You might want to write that down. That's 2011 Form A. Basically the same thing. Let's look at the third version, 2017. Assume that the government of country X takes no policy action to reduce unemployment. If there's unemployment, it means there's a recession. In the long run, what will happen to each of these? And I'm going to give the answer to both. What will happen to the short run aggregate supply curve? As I've already told you, it's going to shift to the right, and you have to explain it. What's going to happen to the long run Phillips curve? The long run Phillips curve is a straight line, remember? And remember, LRAS is a straight line. Nothing is going to happen to those. They're going to stay the same. All right, let's look. We got one more example in 3 minutes to get it done. This was last year. And what's interesting is in these 4 examples, none of them were inflationary gaps. Every single one of them was a recession. The central bank and the government do not take any policy actions to close the output gap. Now remember, the output gap is a different way of talking about it. If you have a positive output gap, remember, that's an inflationary gap. If you have a negative output gap, remember, that's a recession. Remember, it's just them throwing these tricky words at you, tricky phrases to try to mess you up. So if we have anyway, if you'd read up at the top, I cut that off, there's a recession going on. So if they don't do anything to fix it, explain how the economy will adjust to full employment in the long run. It says explain. So here, you're not going to, they don't give you multiple choice. You got to tell them. You say, well, in the long run, if we're in a recession, wages are low. And eventually they will go, wages are going to, oh my gosh, I can't go back and redo this. Let me start this over again. In the long run, as we're in a recession, wages will go down. It'll take them a while because they are sticky, and SRAS will shift to the right, ending the recession. Now look what their second question is. On your graph, show how the economy adjusts to full employment. They didn't say LRAS, but remember, LRAS, long and short run equilibrium, when they cross on that line, that is synonymous with the natural rate of unemployment, which is synonymous with full employment, which means show what happens. And so what you would have done on this question, you would have graphed a recession. And to answer the question, you would just draw the SRAS going to the right. Anyway, I hope I have not confused you by talking so fast. This is a complicated topic. And but I hope you got it. And until next time, I'm going to sign off.